Hi, my name is Hamid Naficy. I'm here to teach a brief course on immigrant cinema, and we will introduce Abderrahmane Sissako after the film, when he will arrive.
Hi, I'm Alison Levine from the French department at the University of Virginia, and I'll also be helping to facilitate the discussion with Abderrahmane Sissako afterwards. So welcome on behalf of the Virginia Film Festival, and we hope you enjoy Life on Earth.
Yes, and also I've been asked to ask you to turn your cell phones and other devices off, please.
On behalf of the Virginia Film Festival and the Department of French Language and Literature at the University of Virginia, I am very pleased and honored to be able to introduce the director of this film, Abderrahmane Sissako. Please welcome him. And we welcome you to stay for a little bit. We're going to have a conversation with Mr. Sissako, and we will also invite you to be part of the discussion.
So why don't we begin by you saying something about your film, your career?
Maybe, peut-être je raconte un peu l'expérience de ce film.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about the experience of making this film, how it came to be.
C'est un film de commande.
It was a film that was ordered from him. Asked of him.
Initié par une production qui a proposé à 10 metteurs en scène qui viennent de pays différents de raconter le passage au millénaire.
It was the idea of a production company to ask 10 directors from 10 different countries to tell the story of the year 2000 in their country.
Donc, moi j'ai été sollicité dans ce cadre-là, donc c'est mon premier long métrage.
And so he was asked to do this project by this company, and it was his first feature.
J'ai tout de suite considéré que déjà parmi les 10 réalisateurs, il y avait un seul qui venait d'Afrique. Tous les autres venaient d'un monde qui a toujours la parole. Qui a toujours la parole.
Oh, so he said of the 10 directors that were in this project, there was only one from Africa, and the other 9 were from parts of the world that always have the floor, or the word.
Et c'est pourquoi mon intention a été de faire tout de suite un film un peu politique.
And so right away he wanted to make a film that would be somewhat political.
So, in a way, your film is a return film for exiles. Here you are from Europe, playing yourself, returning home, but unlike many immigrant films of return, you don't return to home, to your family. All of the film is shot outdoors in the town as people pass by and so forth. You don't see any internal home life. All of what we see is public life. Why did you choose to do that? It seems very impersonal at the same time that it is very loving of the city.
C'est vrai que c'est un dispositif qui est sur la base du film, c'est ça, effectivement. Tous les lieux sont impersonnels, en quelque sorte.
Says it's true that all the places in the film are sort of impersonal.
J'avais envie, avant de partir, de montrer un peu là où je vis, donc l'Occident, et c'est pourquoi j'ai choisi ce supermarché.
Before leaving, he wanted to show the West, where he lives, and that's why he chose the images in the supermarket.
Mais c'était important pour moi d'être client aussi, c'est-à-dire de considérer que la consommation, voilà, que je fais partie de ce monde-là.
And he wanted to show himself actually as a client and as a consumer, to say that, you know, he is part of this world, this consumer world.
Et, pour moi, c'était difficile de rentrer dans l'intimité des gens à Sokolo, parce que c'est un lieu où personne n'a jamais filmé. Donc c'était difficile pour moi de rentrer dans les maisons, de filmer les gens. Donc je pense que c'est quelque sorte par humilité ou timidité. En fait, je pensais que c'était important de ne pas franchir une certaine frontière.
He said that Sokolo was a place where no one had ever filmed, and so he experienced some difficulty in crossing certain boundaries. He didn't mention the word privacy, but I think that's what he's talking about, going into people's intimate spaces. And he also said that it was out of a certain respect and humility on his own part that he didn't want to go into their intimate spaces with this film.
Parce qu'il était important, c'est un film qui essaie de tâtonner les choses. Tout est fait de façon à ce qu'il y ait une certaine distance.
It's a film that tries to approach things, touch things gently, and with a certain delicacy and distance.
Et c'est pour la même raison que j'ai décidé de faire partie du film, d'être filmé, pour que les gens du village se disent tout de suite que si ce que je suis en train de faire est ridicule, je ferai partie de ce ridicule. C'est pourquoi j'ai choisi.
That's one reason he decided. That's one reason he decided to be in the film and to have himself filmed as well, because if the people in the village were to perceive that there was something ridiculous in being filmed, then at least he would put himself in the same position, and he too would be accepting to be ridiculous, to be in front of the camera.
I have one more question about the film, and then we can turn to the audience.
I have one too.
Good. Would you like to go?
Okay, I was wondering if Abderrahmane could say something about the texts in the film, because I'm not sure that the audience is necessarily familiar with these texts, particularly the discours sur le colonialisme.
Je pense que quand on fait un premier film, c'est un acte difficile, c'est pas difficile à faire. Et pour cela, on a besoin de ne pas être seul.
When you make your first film, it's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult first step, and you need to be not to feel alone.
Et c'est pourquoi j'ai décidé de prendre un texte d'un auteur que j'aime beaucoup, qui est Aimé Césaire, qui est quelqu'un qui m'a accompagné bien avant même que je sache que je veux faire du cinéma. Donc c'est une lecture qui m'a nourri en fait.
And so that's why he chose to use this text by Aimé Césaire, who is a writer who had already accompanied Abderrahmane in his life long before making this film. It's a writer who's been very important to him.
Parce que la vision d'Aimé Césaire est une vision d'un grand humaniste.
The vision of Césaire is a humanist one.
Et aussi, peut-être que humaniste et ce que je veux dire c'est la même chose, mais c'est un nom très universel.
And he has a universal voice. He's someone with a universal voice.
Et que c'est dommage qu'un grand poète comme Césaire, qui est très peu connu, même dans le pays, dans son propre pays.
And he finds it a shame that Césaire, who is such a great poet, is not so well known, even in his own country.
Et donc pour moi c'était je voulais m'appuyer sur lui et aussi de faire découvrir à d'autres cette force de la parole et de la poésie.
And I wanted to share with a broader audience the strength and the force of this poetry.
Et c'est la même raison pour laquelle j'ai choisi une musique de Schubert aussi. Parce que C'est quelqu'un qui porte voilà. Moi j'aime les formes qui doutent un peu. Je crois que les grandes musiques ou la grande poésie sont empreintes. Voilà, c'est empreint de doute, il n'y a pas de vérité, c'est pas un concept de vérité.
He likes, he says that the same principle informed his choice of music, and he says that he likes aesthetic forms that doubt. That is, that I think what he means is call into question, ask questions. They're not just pronouncing a truth, a single truth that you're supposed to accept. Is that what you mean?
Oui. Comme la poésie, c'est pas un acte de vérité.
Just like poetry is not an act of truth.
C'est tout simplement un acte.
It's an act.
The other question I had about the film was the way everybody in the film is on the move. On donkeys, on carts, on bicycles, on foot, on everything. And very few people are motionless. And it really creates a very dynamic image of a city in process. It's not stationary. Even those people who are stationary, sitting by the wall in the sun,
They're moving
gradually,
out of the sun. Yeah.
gradually moving.
Oui, je pense que c'est un constat.
That's an observation.
Mais quand on fait un film,
I wanted to see if there was a larger point about homelessness or
moi je pense que
travel.
Je pense que les choses arrivent comme ça. Après, on constate que c'est comme ça. J'avais pas une intention de faire un film où le mouvement est présent. Non. Mais après que j'ai vu ça, c'est que
And he said it was not in his initial intention to make a film where everybody was in motion, but that it happened, and he sort of became aware of it afterwards.
Mais c'est vrai que pour moi, il y a une notion d'exil, forcément, donc, de voyage, de partir, parce que je suis un peu ça. J'ai quitté mon pays à 19 ans et je crois que je ne suis plus jamais retourné pour y vivre en permanence. Donc je suis en constant mouvement.
So it's undeniable that there's a theme of exile, of movement, of travel in this film. And he says it's because that is who he is. He left his country at 19 and he never returned. He didn't return for many, many years, and he still lives in a voluntary exile, and so it's part of who he is. I also wanted to add that one of the things I noticed this time in the film was the movement, but also even the people who aren't moving are constantly involved in communication and contact and exchange. I love the scenes of the radio that sort of weave this whole community together, and also the phone, trying to get in contact, trying to exchange information, and I see the texts also weaving into this this theme of contact and movement and exchange.
So maybe we should open it to the audience
Yes.
to ask questions.
I believe you had a question?
Dove è il supermarché e Sokoto?
The question was, where is the supermarket and where is Sokoto?
Alors, le supermarché se trouve à Paris, dans le 20e arrondissement.
It's in the 20th arrondissement in Paris, the supermarket.
Le métro Nation.
If you want to go there, you can get off at Metro Stop Nation.
Voilà. Et ce que j'ai filmé, c'est dans le sous-sol.
He filmed in the basement.
Et Sokolo est un petit village qui est sur la frontière malienne et mauritanienne.
Oh, sorry, Sokolo it's a small village on the border between Mali and Mauritania.
C'est le village de mon père, disons.
It's the village of his father's village. Hamid, do you want to recognize the people.
Yes.
So I can
Exactly.
concentrate on translating and
Yes,
don't
that
forget.
lady in the back, yes.
Can you hear me from back there?
Yes.
I'm curious about the relationship between César's text, the poetic text, and the scenes in the village. Because that text launches an accusation against Europe for its many corpses, for being the most murderous civilization. And then when we see the scenes in the village, we don't get a sense of that post-colonial critique. There's no evidence that Europe has done any damage there. Are we supposed to see any evidence of a post-colonial critique there or not?
Est-ce que tu veux montrer des traces dans ce village de mots du colonialisme? Est-ce que tu voulais porter une critique post-coloniale? Est-ce que tu voulais montrer une société meurtrie en quelque sorte?
Bon, c'est vrai que la relation entre le nord et le sud de l'Afrique et l'Europe dans l'histoire est une relation qui a causé énormément de préjudice. Et,
It's true that the relationship between the North and the South, between Europe and Africa, has caused a great deal of harm.
mais quand on veut faire un film qui a une dimension politique pour dénoncer certaines choses, je crois que il faut pas se mettre dans cette place-là, en fait. Moi, ma place n'était pas vraiment de dénoncer de façon spectaculaire. Je voulais pas ça.
If you want to make a film, a political film that denounces certain things, he thinks his place or his approach is not to be overtly and literally that of a denouncer.
Comme
Spectacular. He used the word spectacular. He didn't want to make a spectacular denunciation.
Comme le dit Césaire dans le film, un homme qui crie n'est pas un ours qui danse.
As Césaire says in the film, a man who shouts is not a bear who dances.
Que la vie n'est pas un spectacle.
Life is not a spectacle. And it's
The gentleman in the middle there.
In fact, I was going to ask about the bear that dances. That was one question as to what that meant. And the other is, was the phone and communications with the phone somehow a metaphor for the sense of contact or lack thereof with Europe and Italy?
que le téléphone, c'est pas une métaphore, ce sont du contact avec l'Europe.
Si vous avez cette sensation, c'est peut-être oui, mais moi ma raison est différente.
If you think that's what it's about, then maybe it is. But the reason he was thinking about with the phone was different.
Moi je connais cette poste avant de venir filmer. Je sais que la communication ne marche pas bien.
He knows this particular post office. He knew it before coming to make his film, and he knew that it didn't work very well, the phone.
Oui. Mais je voulais montrer par ça, dans une forme de métaphore, que l'intention de communiquer est plus importante que la communication elle-même.
And what he was thinking about was that the phone showed that the intention to communicate, the will to communicate, was more important than the actual communication.
Voilà, que le désir de parler à l'autre est quelque chose de très important et que même si ça ne marche pas.
What it's about is the desire to speak to the other, even if it doesn't work.
Voilà. Et qu'une société, et donc là il y a une comparaison, l'Occident qui domine cette forme de communication, que ce soit le téléphone, Internet, tout, qui est une bonne chose, parce que ça apporte beaucoup de choses, mais qu'il n'y a pas forcément... les gens ne se parlent pas beaucoup.
No.
Ils ne communiquent pas.
Tell me the songs to
Oui.
And what he sees is this is it is about communication, but it's about a communication between the North and the South, or between the West and the rest. That's only in one direction. Communication towards the West in that direction doesn't work as well.
Voilà.
So the messages coming from Africa back to Europe aren't really getting through. that's what he was
And
thinking about.
What about the reference on, like, was it the dancing bear? I can't remember, but it seemed very bitter. What was being stated there?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand. You want to
There was
ask
a
him?
reference in terms of, it seemed a comparison between, I can't remember the first part of the quote.
The man who shouts is not a
I'm
dancing
sorry?
bear?
Screaming.
Yes.
The screaming man is not a dancing bear?
Right.
You want to say some more about that? Can you
Non.
explain that?
Je répondais à la dame qui demandait est-ce que je voulais montrer les conséquences de cette relation entre l'Europe et l'Afrique.
No, he said he was talking in response to Laura, who asked the question about whether this film was a response to.
Donc je disais que je n'ai pas voulu montrer la souffrance même parce que c'est difficile.
Said he didn't want to show too much suffering because it's difficult,
Mais je voulais en même temps parler de ça.
but he wanted to talk about that.
Et c'est pourquoi le texte de Césaire dit la vie n'est pas un spectacle. Un ours qui danse, un homme qui crie n'est pas un ours qui danse.
I think, okay, so a screaming man is not a dancing bear. What he means by that is that you can't make a spectacle out of suffering, as you would of dancing bear at a circus.
Et que la meilleure façon
He
de
doesn't
parler,
want to make a spectacle out of that kind of suffering.
voilà, je pense que la meilleure façon de parler de la violence de la guerre n'est pas forcément de montrer cette violence au quotidien. En fait.
The best way to talk about violence of war or other kinds of violence is not necessarily to show the violence,
Parce qu'au final, ça devient un spectacle.
because that turns it into a spectacle, and that's what he's trying
So
to
it's
do.
understated, is there that reference then they think about how they need assistance, or they always need assistance, or some reference like that? That somebody was saying they can't get along without assistance.
Yeah, I did say that Europe, that we need help. Here at some point there was a passage.
Alors, est-ce qu'il y a le message qu'ils ont besoin d'aide et qu'ils ont besoin d'assistance?
Non, je pense pas que c'est qu'on demande de l'aide à l'Europe. Moi, mon rapport avec la notion de l'aide est très complexe.
No, he doesn't think he's not trying to say that Africa needs assistance or needs aid. His relationship with this whole idea of aid is very complicated.
Ça peut surprendre de dire ça,
And it might surprise you for him to say that.
mais parce que tout simplement, la main qui reçoit est en bas de celle qui donne.
The hand that receives is lower than that gives.
Et donc il y a une position d'inégalité. Voilà.
So there's a position of inequality when you talk
Moi,
about aid or assistance.
je préfère parler de partage. Voilà. Il est important de partager la richesse du monde.
He prefers to talk about sharing the riches of the world.
Et que c'est parce que cette richesse est mal partagée que mal partagée, n'est
Oh,
pas
because these
partagée
riches have been
avec
poorly shared,
justesse
not been properly shared.
que les conflits, les guerres et beaucoup de choses, voilà, que le monde souffre. Je pense que c'est ça. Donc aller dans une notion de partage plus juste.
And he would like to go towards an idea of more equal, more equitable sharing.
There was a question in the middle sometime ago.
Yes. Well, first, I guess a comment in which I want to gently disagree, I guess, with something that has been said before, because I didn't find the film really impersonal. I thought that because of the movement in which you have spoken, the editing, the music, that we got a sense of the rhythms of life in the village, and that we saw what we needed to see of the characters, even those who might be secretive or formal or coy. We felt the music. And the question would be, and also the beauty of the place. And the question, which may be a silly question, because you've already said that it's difficult to make a film for the first time, is well, one knows that a place can be beautiful, but it may not be obvious unless you're careful to frame your shots correctly. So I just want to ask you if this, if he found this, the depicting of the beauty of the sense of the life of the village, if he found this difficult or he found it or he found that this can easily do it?
Alors, il ne trouve pas du tout le film impersonnel, pas personnalité, il trouve une intimité, culturelle, capture les rythmes de la vie du village et il trouve une grande beauté dans des images. Et la question c'est est-ce que trouver et cadrer cette beauté pour montrer au spectateur, ça a été facile pour toi ou moins facile?
Je dirais que ça a été facile.
It was easy.
Parce que c'est un décor naturel, mais en même temps, quand on fait un film, on fait les choix de perspectives, de rues, qu'on trouve plus intéressant par la forme, par l'architecture. Donc il y a un désir de rendre quelque chose de...
He says that there is he finds that there's just the beauty of the shots came naturally from the natural beauty of the place. But of course, when you're making a film, you choose which street, this street and not that street. And he is very influenced by trying to make beautiful images.
Gentleman in back. Yeah.
I'm very interested in the episode with the birds. The birds are obviously very, very destructive to the rice crops, and yet the people are not allowed to kill them. And I'm wondering if that is a critique of environmental laws that don't take into account the life of the village itself and the needs of the people.
Les oiseaux et les gens qui n'ont pas le droit de les tuer, est-ce que c'est une critique des lois de l'environnement pour la protection de la nature qui ne prennent pas en compte les besoins économiques des gens?
Non, c'est pas ça. Je voulais montrer en plus de la difficulté des gens au quotidien, qu'il y a des catastrophes qui arrivent, comme parfois les oiseaux qui viennent comme des sauterelles, et qui peuvent manger tout le travail d'un paysan qui n'a pas beaucoup de moyens pour les chasser.
He wasn't thinking about making a critique of the environmental laws, but simply it was another way of showing the kinds of suffering people can experience. A plague of birds arriving at the end of the just before the harvest can completely destroy the crops. Tu ne voulais rien dire sur les lois? Vraiment?
Sur les lois, non. Parce que mon père est un paysan, en fait.
His father is a farmer.
Enfin, il est redevenu paysan quand il est parti à la retraite, donc il est venu s'installer à Sokolo. Donc il cultive le riz.
So his father is actually a rice grower, and in retirement came back to Sokolo to grow rice.
Et si vous je sais que vous ne vous rappelez pas, mais le début du film, il y a un texte, donc une lettre que j'adresse à mon père.
At the beginning of the film, in the letter that he addresses to his father.
Et je dis dans cette lettre que Jidou, donc, qui est le prénom de mon petit frère, m'a dit que les oiseaux sont partis et c'est une bonne nouvelle.
He says in this letter that his little brother Jidou told him that the birds had left and that it was good news.
Et ça c'est une réalité. Jidou m'a téléphoné pour dire que, voilà, que les oiseaux sont partis.
And that's a real autobiographical detail. I think what he's talking about is the desire to express a documentary reality, and that's part of what characterizes.
Je voulais faire exister cette angoisse quand même du paysan qui peut voir tout son travail gâché à une journée.
He wanted to show how upsetting it can be for a farmer who may lose his entire work for the year, his entire harvest.
The gentleman there and then the lady in the back.
I thought it was magnificent the way the little pieces of action we saw suggested there was a lot of other things going on. It created a really rich environment. In fact, so much of the action seemed to be directed specifically towards things we didn't see. The only action that I was very curious about what was really behind it was the group of marching men. And what was that? And what motivated that? And what was that about?
Les gens qui marchent. En ce moment-là, je me sers d'un autre texte de Césaire pour mieux faire comprendre cette séquence.
At that time, at that moment in the film, he's using another text from Césaire.
Et je ne me rappelle pas exactement du texte, mais le texte dit « De nouveau devant moi, cette vie, non pas cette fille, cette mort qui clopine de petitesse en petitesse. » Bon, c'est la
I'm not a
poésie.
poet, so translating Césaire is, there are much better translations, but
De nouveau devant moi, cette vie, non pas cette fille.
once again before me, not this life, but this death.
Mais cette mort qui clopine,
This death that makes the sound of a horse's feet
qui clopine de
in front of
petitesse en
me.
petitesse.
From littleness to
Voilà.
littleness.
Bon, bref, non, c'était pour dire que donc, j'essaie de soutenir ce sont des hommes qui reviennent d'un enterrement.
These are men that are coming back from a funeral.
Mais je voulais pas matérialiser le corps
But he didn't want to show the body.
d'un enfant, parce que dans la réalité, tous les jours, il y a des enfants qui mouraient dans ce village.
And in reality, it was a child that had died. Every day, children die in this village, and he didn't want to show the body of a child.
Donc, j'ai juste fait une mise en scène où les hommes marchent, et devant ce retour-là, tout le monde s'éclipse, rentre dans les maisons.
And everyone, as they come back from the burial, everyone disappears into the houses in front of the movement of these
Ou
people.
un forgeron qui arrête de travailler pour respecter voilà, ce moment-là.
Or a blacksmith who puts down his tools to respect the passage of the.
Et voilà, et la mort fait partie du quotidien. La mort est visible. Tous les jours, on peut voir un cortège qui passe.
He says death is an everyday event, everyday part of life in this village, and every day you see somebody going somewhere for a burial.
Peut-être inconsciemment, moi je vis en Europe et j'ai l'impression que la mort n'existe pas parce que je ne la vois pas. Mon voisin peut mourir, je ne me rends pas compte.
He says he lives in Europe and he has the impression that death doesn't exist in Europe because it's so invisible. His neighbor could die and he wouldn't even know it.
Et la mort est cachée. Et cette façon fragilise l'homme quand on ne vit pas avec la mort au quotidien. Donc,
He said that death, the invisibility of death in Western cultures makes us more fragile when we don't live with it every day. It's not part of our daily lives, and he thinks it makes us more fragile, more vulnerable.
voilà. Donc peut-être c'est pour ces raisons que j'ai voulu faire exister voilà, ce cortège que je voyais avant quand j'étais petit, mais que je ne vois plus depuis une trentaine d'années.
And so he wanted to, this was actually a memory from his childhood of these everyday occurrences of burials that he wanted to put back into his film because it had disappeared from his life in Europe, his daily life in Europe.
And then Julia.
That explains a little bit what I was going to ask because I noticed an absence of laughter in the film, and I didn't know if it was because the people are naturally subdued, if that's part of their culture, or if in fact it's a reflection of all the hardship that they go through.
Il a dit qu'il y a un manque de rire. Est-ce que tu as fait exprès pour ne pas montrer des gens qui rient? Est-ce que tu trouves que ça fait partie de la vie?
And the girl went from being happy to very sad when she was being photoed.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
And the girl went from being happy to very sad when she was having her photograph taken.
Et la fille, elle est contente, mais après, elle est plus sérieuse pour la photo.
Oui, c'est vrai. Je trouvais que cette fille était belle.
Thought this city was beautiful.
Non, c'est la fille.
Oh, sorry, the girl was beautiful.
Et elle aimait s'habiller comme ça. C'est sa façon de s'habiller. Mais j'avais vu chez elle qu'il y avait au-delà quelque chose, une souffrance, une tristesse.
And he saw in her a deep sadness or a suffering.
Et c'est pour moi une façon de dire qu'au-delà du physique, qu'il y a l'être humain.
beyond the physical, he said there is the human being.
Voilà, que c'est peut-être ça qu'il faut aller chercher et comprendre. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai choisi cette scène-là de la montrer triste.
And that's why he chose to show her sad in the scene, because he tries to go beyond the external beauty to reach into the human being underneath.
Mais je voulais pas faire un film triste.
He didn't want to make a sad film.
C'est pourquoi je fais en sorte qu'il y a de l'humour, que celui qui regarde le film puisse y rire, en fait.
That's why he wants there to be humor in the film. When you're watching it, you laugh. You do laugh in various moments.
Does she leave at the end with her suitcase?
Oui. D'abord, dans la réalité, il faut savoir que moi j'ai tourné le film à Sokolo et cette fille était sur son vélo, elle est rentrée dans le film.
In real life, he was making a film in Sokolo, and this real girl, when came in, she rode her bike into the film.
Et donc j'ai demandé à mon assistant d'aller chercher la fille. Donc quand on l'a trouvée, j'ai compris qu'elle n'est pas de Sokolo, qu'elle est de passage.
And so he told his assistant to go find the woman. He was very interested in her, and he found out that she wasn't from Sokolo, that she was actually just passing through.
Voilà. Donc je voulais être un peu fidèle au personnage en fait.
And so he wanted to remain true to her character in real life.
Mais aussi, je pense une scène dans un film, un moment dans un film, son interprétation juste appartient beaucoup plus à celui qui regarde que celui qui le fait.
But he says that the true interpretation of a scene in a film belongs more to the person watching the film than to the person who made the image. So he's placing the interpretation in your hands.
Mais je voulais peut-être montrer la place de la femme quand même dans cette société, son courage et son désir de continuer quelque chose.
But he did want to show, he was thinking about showing the place of women in this society, their courage and their determination to go on, to move forward.
All right. So I'm curious about the episode when the young man with a donkey cart and the cargo on his car fell out and he picked it up. So he just unstably ran out of camera, and then the motorcycle just went across the camera. I wonder if that's your symbolism of the coexistence of the tradition and the modernism in the kind of little town with memory of your own childhood.
Yes. Did everyone hear the question?
Okay. Yes.
In the film, there's a sign that says, "Our goal is for everyone to have a telephone." 10 years after you made the film, is there more than one telephone in Sokolo?
Maintenant, est-ce qu'il y a plus d'un téléphone à Sokolo?
Je connais très bien l'homme qui travaille à la poste et qui est devenu un ami.
He's good friends with the guy who works at the post office.
Et il me téléphone de temps en temps.
And he calls from time to time.
Ça marche mieux.
It's working better.
Mais maintenant, il me dit qu'il n'a pas beaucoup de travail maintenant parce qu'il n'y a que des portables.
Everyone has cell phones now, so he doesn't. The guy in the post office doesn't have a lot of phone business anymore.
Et que la poste a décidé de fermer, je pense, l'année prochaine cette poste parce que personne n'utilise, personne ne vient.
So the post office is actually going to be closed next year because no one comes to make phone calls.
What's been the reaction to the film in the 10 years that it's been out?
Quelle a été la réaction du public en général?
On est revenu à Sokolo pour montrer ce film dans le village.
He says they went back to Sokolo to show the film in the village.
Et il y a un petit film qui a été fait qui s'appelle La Projection.
And they made a little film called The Projection.
Et qui raconte l'histoire de cette projection.
which tells the story of this of this screening.
Ça a été quelque chose de très émouvant, de très important, parce que je crois que chaque personne, le cinéma, l'image, c'est un miroir, et chaque personne a besoin de se voir projeté.
He said that it was very touching and very moving, this experience of showing the film in the village. The cinema is a mirror, and everyone feels the need to see themselves projected on screen. So I guess this was a very real way of making it happen.
Et j'étais surpris par une chose que je ne savais pas. Il y a un moment où il y a un oiseau rouge qui est dans le film.
He was surprised by something he didn't even notice. There is one moment when there's a red bird in the film.
Et quand les habitants du village ont vu ça, tout le monde a crié.
And when the people of the village saw the bird in the film, they screamed.
Parce que c'est cet oiseau rouge qui annonce toujours l'arrivée des autres oiseaux.
Because this is the red bird that announces the arrival of the other birds, the birds that are going to eat the harvest.
Donc pour les gens, c'est comme si le voleur a été pris en fait. Donc que j'ai matérialisé cet oiseau de mauvais augure. C'était très fort.
As if the thief had been caught, because he actually materialized the bad omen, the bird of bad omen in his film. He captured him.
Bon, ça c'est la projection dans le village à Bamako même au Mali. Il y a eu des projections avec un public très différent. Parce que le public de Sokolo n'est pas c'est pas les critiques. Donc le plus important, c'est pas que le film soit bien ou pas bien, qu'il existe, que eux ils sont dans ce film.
So for this audience, he says the most important thing is not that it was a good film or a bad film, but that the film that it happened, it exists, and they're in it. But then he said that the film was also shown in Bamako, in Mali, which was a very different audience.
C'était en même temps difficile parce que un an après, il y avait des personnes que j'avais filmées et qui n'étaient plus vivantes.
And so the projection was a year later?
Oui.
Oh, so we're back to the village. He showed the film, the screening of the film in the village was a year later, and some people were no longer alive who were in the film. And that was very...
Oui.
One last question. Yes.
I just want to thank you for that experience. It was very touching, very, very beautiful. But also, I've never had the opportunity to feel time so differently. And you have these images of Africa all the time, but they're cut very quickly, even when you're studying or involved in documentation of various things that are happening. And this is the first experience I've had of trying to change my sense of time and just, wait there with them. And I was very grateful for that.
Permis de voir le passage, de sentir le passage du temps d'une manière que toutes les autres images de l'Afrique et la vie ne l'ont pas permis.
One last one.
Is the film available in CD that we can play in the U.S.?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Subtitled and on DVD.
You can get it to Amazon probably. One very last one, really.
Where do you see the future of this conversation between North and South?
Comment je vois le futur? Pour qu'il y ait futur, je pense que entre deux lieux, il faut qu'il existe un pont. Un vrai pont.
Between two places, he thinks it is necessary. We need to have a real bridge.
Et un pont ne doit pas être dans un seul sens.
And a bridge cannot be a one-way bridge.
Un pont doit être dans les deux sens. En tout cas, ceux qui empruntent doivent pouvoir emprunter ce pont dans les deux sens.
And people should be able to travel across this bridge in both directions.
Mais aujourd'hui, le déséquilibre du monde, d'un monde riche face à un monde pauvre, c'est que le monde riche a la liberté d'aller visiter le pauvre, mais il n'y a pas de visite possible dans l'autre sens.
And with two worlds, a rich world and a poor world, the bridge is only working in one direction because rich people can go visit poor countries, but it can't happen in the other direction.
Et je pense vraiment que notre devoir à tous, sans avoir un sentiment de culpabilité, c'est d'essayer de construire un monde meilleur, mais un monde meilleur partout.
And he says that our duty, he says we don't need to feel guilty about anything, but our duty is to build a better world, and a better world everywhere.
Parce que, sans rentrer dans une forme polémique, ce qui se passe dans le monde aujourd'hui, le crash financier. Hein?
He doesn't want to enter into a big polemic, but what's happening in the world today with this financial crash.
Où le monde riche, l'Europe, l'Amérique est venu au secours de ça, parce que les moyens existent. Mais les pays pauvres vont le ressentir, le ressentent déjà.
The rich world is going to feel some reverberations from this, but the poor world, the poor parts of the world have already felt it.
Donc il y a une notion qu'il faut quand même essayer de partager, c'est-à-dire que le crime contre l'humanité, aujourd'hui dont on parle le plus souvent, ce sont les guerres.
Crimes against humanity, which are in the news, are usually related to war.
Mais moi je pense que le danger des finances peut être aussi un crime.
But he thinks it's financial disequilibrium in the world
Et que c'est
can
important,
also be a crime.
voilà, et que c'est important de réfléchir sur ça.
And we all need to think about that.
Parce qu'on peut détruire le monde virtuellement, parce que l'argent est virtuel aujourd'hui.
Money is virtual, and so we can arrive at a virtual destruction of the world.
Et on peut se réveiller un matin et on nous dira que voilà, la bourse, voilà, et c'est virtuel, mais les conséquences sont terribles.
We can wake up one morning and the stock market is gone, and the consequences are terrible, even though it's virtual.
Voilà,
It's terrible.
donc qu'est-ce que c'est que le développement si on n'est pas capable de protéger le monde comme ça?
What is development if we're not even able to protect the world?
Merci.